A massive assault on Kyiv by Russian forces early this morning has left at least 30 civilians dead and triggered urgent calls for increased military support from Ukraine's President Zelensky. Here's a detailed breakdown of this shocking event and its implications. The immediate future is fraught with uncertainty following recent escalations in the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. In the wake of intensified hostilities, Ukraine is likely to retaliate with drone and missile strikes targeting Russian military bases, particularly in Crimea and along the border regions. President Volodymyr Zelensky has already signaled that Ukraine will not tolerate such aggressive actions without a robust response, indicating a shift in military strategy. Historically, Ukraine has demonstrated resilience and adaptability in its defense efforts, relying on both conventional and unconventional warfare tactics. In reaction to these developments, the US and European Union may accelerate arms shipments, particularly air defense systems like the Patriot and NASAMS, to bolster Ukraine's military capabilities. However, political divisions within Europe and the United States could slow this process, complicating the delivery of essential military support amidst growing urgency. The risk of nuclear escalation looms large, as Russia may resort to nuclear threats or limited use if it feels cornered by Western forces. This scenario, while considered low probability, carries the potential for catastrophic consequences that could reverberate globally. The recent attack could galvanize international support for Ukraine, prompting nations to rally behind its cause, enhancing diplomatic and military alliances. Conversely, it may drive Russia to forge new alliances with countries like China or Iran, seeking to counterbalance Western influence and pressure. Furthermore, the humanitarian crisis is expected to worsen, with rising civilian casualties and extensive damage to critical infrastructure. This dire situation will necessitate urgent international aid, as millions of displaced families seek shelter and basic necessities. The coming weeks will be pivotal in determining whether Western nations will take decisive action to prevent further atrocities and protect civilians caught in the crossfire. The war in Ukraine has now entered its fifth year, with no clear end in sight. Over the past year, Russia has shifted from broad front offensives to targeted, high-impact strikes on Ukrainian cities, particularly Kyiv, as part of a terror-by-drone and missile campaign. This change in strategy reflects a grim reality on the battlefield, where Russia has reportedly suffered staggering losses, with estimates suggesting over 450,000 military personnel killed since the conflict began. Such sacrifices indicate a troubling willingness by the Kremlin to expend massive manpower to achieve its strategic objectives, despite the significant toll on its own forces. Western allies have been slow to deliver advanced weaponry, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to Russian air superiority. This delay has exacerbated the situation, as Ukrainian forces struggle to defend against increasingly sophisticated aerial assaults. The diplomatic landscape remains bleak, with a persistent stalemate that shows no signs of resolution. Russia continues to reject Western peace proposals, while Ukraine maintains its demand for full territorial restoration, creating an unbridgeable gap between the two sides. The recent escalations in drone and missile strikes have targeted not only military assets but also aimed at crippling Ukraine's energy infrastructure, sowing fear and disrupting daily life. This tactic has had devastating effects on civilian morale, pushing many Ukrainians to the brink of despair. Looking ahead, the outlook remains uncertain, with both sides entrenched in their positions. As winter approaches, the humanitarian crisis is expected to deepen further, making it imperative for international actors to reassess their strategies. The urgency for renewed diplomatic efforts is clear, as stability in the region hinges on finding a viable path toward peace, particularly in addressing the pressing needs of the civilian population suffering from the ongoing conflict. This attack is strategically and symbolically pivotal. It marks the third deadliest assault on Kyiv since the war began in 2022, surpassing previous ones in civilian casualties and destruction. The relentless bombardment has devastated neighborhoods, turning once bustling streets into scenes of chaos and despair. This escalation signals a shift toward more brutal, indiscriminate targeting by Russian forces, indicating a potential strategy to instill fear and disrupt daily life in Ukraine's capital. The psychological impact is profound. Kyiv, long viewed as a fortified capital, now faces a stark reality that shatters the perception of safety. Families who once felt secure in their homes now grapple with uncertainty as schools and markets become potential targets. This erosion of confidence could lead to increased anxiety among civilians, potentially prompting a reevaluation of the government's protective capabilities. In the immediate aftermath, President Zelensky urgently called on Western allies to expedite weapons deliveries, emphasizing that without long-range missiles and advanced air defense systems, Ukraine cannot effectively deter future attacks. This plea underscores the growing dependency on international military support as Ukraine grapples with the escalating threat to its sovereignty. The global implications are equally concerning. This attack reinforces fears that Russia is intensifying its war effort rather than de-escalating. Such developments raise alarms about the risk of nuclear escalation, especially as conventional forces are employed with increasing ferocity. The international community must recognize the gravity of this situation, as it not only affects Ukraine but also has ramifications for global security. As the conflict intensifies, the outlook remains uncertain. Ukraine's resilience is commendable, yet the sustained pressure from Russian forces poses significant challenges. The urgency for military aid has never been more critical, as Kyiv seeks to bolster its defenses against a relentless adversary. Additionally, the geopolitical landscape is shifting, with alliances being tested and new strategies emerging in response to the evolving threat. The next few weeks could prove decisive for Ukraine's defense strategy and its ability to withstand further assaults. With Western support crucial, the focus must remain on ensuring that Ukraine receives the necessary resources to navigate this perilous chapter in its history, as the stakes for both Ukraine and global stability continue to rise. In the early hours of Thursday, July 2, 2026, Russia launched a sweeping aerial assault on Kyiv using a combination of missiles, drones, and glide bombs. The attack targeted multiple districts across the city, including residential neighborhoods, critical infrastructure, and cultural sites. At least 30 civilians were killed, and dozens more were injured, with many trapped under rubble as emergency crews worked through the night to rescue survivors. Ukrainian officials described the strike as massive and ferocious, with air defense systems overwhelmed by the volume and coordination of the onslaught. Damage was extensive, apartment buildings were gutted, a section of the power grid was destroyed, and a historic museum suffered partial collapse. This assault is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader Russian strategy aimed at degrading Ukraine's morale and infrastructure ahead of potential diplomatic shifts or military escalations. The ongoing war, which began in 2014 with Russia's annexation of Crimea, has undergone numerous phases, but this latest attack signifies a troubling escalation. The increased use of high-precision strikes against civilian targets indicates a shift in tactics that seeks to instill fear and disrupt daily life for residents in Kyiv. Observers note that such actions are intended to undermine public confidence in the Ukrainian government and its ability to protect its citizens, further exacerbating an already tense situation. The impact of this assault extends beyond immediate casualties and destruction. It poses significant challenges for Ukraine's emergency services and healthcare system, which are already strained by years of conflict. The psychological toll on survivors and the broader population cannot be understated, as fear and uncertainty grip the city. Internationally, this assault may provoke a stronger response from Western allies, potentially leading to increased military aid or sanctions against Russia. Looking ahead, the situation remains precarious as Ukraine braces for further aggression. The resilience of Kyiv's residents will be tested in the coming days, and the international community must respond decisively to prevent a further deterioration of stability in the region. A coordinated response could be vital in deterring future attacks and supporting Ukraine's defense efforts against ongoing Russian aggression, ensuring that the spirit of resistance remains unbroken. As Russia intensifies its assault on Ukraine, will the West finally step up to provide the necessary support? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for daily deep dives into the most pressing global issues.